Located in the middle of the Himalayas, Nepal is one of the most isolated, remote, and poorest countries in the world. Traditionally, it has been a kind of protectorate, a satellite country for India. However, at the end of 2017, the Communist Party of Nepal won the elections with an overwhelming majority, and they've now set their sights on Beijing. In this video, we're going to show you what is happening and a bit about this country's greatest hidden treasure. So let's get into it. Alright, so I got a question for you, and please don't Google the answer, that would be cheating. Do you know which country Buddha was born in? 1, 2, 3, you could probably guess. It's Nepal, a country located in the Himalayas, which hosts many of the highest mountains in the world. Specifically, in this country, which covers an area about the size of Nicaragua, we can find 8 out of the 14 summits in the entire world that reach more than 8,000 meters. And this includes, of course, Mount Everest. The country also boasts a total of 240 peaks that reach higher than 6,000 meters. In other words, Nepal is an absolute paradise for people who love mountains. And by the way, Kathmandu, its capital and the largest city in the Himalayas, is also one of backpackers' favorite cities on the planet. And, well, why is this? Well, maybe it has something to do with the fact that this city is full of temples, pagodas, and alleys full of life. A capital where, in the 21st century, you won't be able to find skyscrapers, wide avenues, modern buses, or practically any luxury franchise. It sounds pretty cool, right? Like one of those last drops of history in a totally modern and global world. Well, as wonderful as it sounds for a visit, the reality is that Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world. According to the United Nations, Nepal is one of the Asian countries with the worst Human Development Index scores. Indeed, Nepal comes in at 144th in that ranking, and to be honest, this isn't really surprising. See, despite having almost 30 million inhabitants, its economy is smaller than that of Bolivia, whose population barely exceeds 10 million people. That means that in per capita terms, Bolivia is 3 times richer than Nepal. That's why, with every day that passes, 1,500 people move abroad. 1,500 people! And dear viewer, this has not made it easy for the Nepalese. Do you want to know why? Well, listen up.
A dominated country.
Nepal's political system has been anchored in the past until practically the day before yesterday. Yep, in 2008, Nepal was an absolutist monarchy under the exclusive control of the king. And by the way, fun little tidbit of knowledge right now, despite being the birthplace of Buddha himself until 2006, this was the only country in the world where Hinduism was the official religion. But not only that, between 1996 and 2006, the country suffered through a civil war between governmental forces, the monarchy, dictatorship forces, and the Maoist rebels who supported the establishment of a communist republic. Yes, you heard that right. Monarchy, civil war, Maoism. Probably can understand now why this country is quite so poor. There has been such a huge amount of chaos in the last 30 years that the average life expectancy of a government was, wait for it, 1 year. But, dear viewer, that is certainly not everything. Nepal has another characteristic that has greatly conditioned its political and economic situation. See, as you probably know, Nepal has no coast. And have you noticed who are their only neighbors? Exactly. Nepal is stuck between 2 giants, between the 2 most probable future great powers of this century. Of course, that's India and that's China. 2 countries that, moreover, don't exactly get on very well, as we have seen previously on VisualPolitik. Yes, we could say that both China and India are in the forefront of Nepal's Ministry of Foreign Affairs mind. Well, the fact is that traditionally and largely thanks to the geography that favors it, Nepal has been kind of a satellite country for India, something the New Delhi government has always been very, very clear about.
India wants to micromanage Nepal. They have to control all government appointments. They have to know everything. Their ambassadors behave like viceroys. Aren't we a sovereign nation? Kishore Shrestha, editor of Jana Asta National Weekly and a board member of Nepal's press council.
Perhaps the best proof of how India has always wanted to control this remote country's destiny happens in 2015. At that time, political forces were designing the constitution of the newly created Democratic Federal Republic of Nepal, while New Delhi demanded that Nepal create a separate province for people of Indian descent who were living in the Terai Plains, a region in southern Nepal on the border with India. This was something that the Nepalese political forces emphatically opposed. They wouldn't establish political separations based on identity under any circumstances. Well, when New Delhi didn't get an affirmative answer, what do you think they did? Well, they blocked the borders. Now, it was all unofficial, but provision trucks, they just stopped crossing. Now, this would have been bad, really, really bad, under any circumstances, but on top of all of that, this blockade happened when the country was at its worst. It had just suffered a huge earthquake that caused enormous damage.
The deadly 7.8 magnitude earthquake that struck Nepal in 2015 and killed thousands of people was so powerful it moved Mount Everest.
And you know what? This hasn't been the only blockade or the only strategy that India has used to pressure the Nepalese politicians to follow their advice. After all, trade with India has traditionally accounted for almost 3/4 of all Nepalese trade. But now, after centuries of absolute monarchy and decades of war and chaos, things are finally beginning to normalize in Nepal and democracy is gaining strength. And also, China's doors, they're beginning to open.
China's arrival.
China and Nepal share a 1,400-kilometer border, and in recent years, this border has become, well, quite fashionable. Commercial relations between both countries have tripled since 2010. China has also become the country that invests the most money every year in Nepal, and tourism coming from the great Asian power is growing rapidly. In the last 10 years alone, despite the earthquake, the number of Chinese tourists arriving in Nepal every year has multiplied by 4.
At present, China-Nepal relations are developing at the fastest pace we've seen. Yu Hong, China's ambassador in Nepal.
That's how relations between Nepal and China are growing.
Hydropower to cement, Chinese businesses are already all around this small South Asian country. Chinese internet providers are breaking Indian monopoly, Chinese tourists are flooding Nepal, Chinese language institutions are mushrooming, more Nepali students are traveling to China than to India, and hundreds of Nepali officers are invited to China every year as part of an unprecedented charm offensive.
But you know what? That's not all. At the end of 2017, elections were held to elect a new parliament and a brand new government. The Communist Party's victory was overwhelming, and this is a Communist Party very much influenced by Beijing. Now the new Prime Minister, Kartiga Prasad Oli, has boosted relations with its northern neighbor to grow trade and investment, but also to gain independence from India as its #1 priority. And folks, Beijing clearly doesn't want to miss this opportunity. Therefore, Beijing is putting huge projects on the table to change Nepal's situation forever. Roads, airports, and above all, the promise of a new railway line.
I appreciate the Chinese leadership, Chinese government and Chinese people. Because China respects sovereignty of Nepal, never interferes in its internal affairs.
For example, the Chinese government has announced that it's looking into extending the railway that connects Tibet with the eastern coast all the way to the Nepalese border. And there is little doubt that China would have no problem financing the railway's construction all the way to Kathmandu. And by the way, we are really not talking about a small project here. Connecting Nepal and China by rail could mean multiplying the arrival of Chinese tourists by 10, 15, or even 20 times. And if the train, in addition, was connected to the Indian railway network, we could be speaking of a revolution in transporting merchandise between the two great giants.
If we can connect this railway network to our East-West Rail project, it can revolutionize China-India trade, with Nepal in the middle. Khadga Prasad Oli, Prime Minister of Nepal.
Of course, the new government doesn't intend to break ties with India, but it looks like Nepal has stopped being New Delhi's subordinate. And most importantly, for the first time, it looks like this country has a clear option for a better future. You want to know how? Well, listen up.
The future: water and mountains.
Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world, but it doesn't have to continue to be so. Allow me to explain. On the one hand, Nepal is a country with nature, mountains, exotic landscapes, and an impressive gastronomy. I mean, it's no secret that its tourism potential is absolutely huge, especially if communications with China improve. And as we've seen, that's pretty damn likely to happen. I mean, who would not like to visit Nepal? But that's not all. In fact, far from it. Nepal's great hidden treasure is actually water. Yep, you heard that right. It's really water. As we've already seen, Nepal has huge mountains and steep valleys that have been carved by large rivers. And what can be done with all of this natural wealth? Well, studies conducted by the Nepalese government show that Nepal's abundant water resources can produce huge amounts of hydroelectric power at a very low cost. Basically, its potential power generation capacity could be almost 50%, half of all the hydropower that is produced within the United States. And that, dear viewer, is a lot of electricity. Now, let's not forget Nepal is located between India and China and very close to Bangladesh. These are three fast-growing economies whose electricity consumption is absolutely soaring. And Nepal, well, it may have the capacity to supply them with the cheapest electricity of all. Now, of course, so far, none of this has been exploited, but everything indicates that this abandonment can be left behind very quickly. If the country regains stability, investors will line up to finance and develop this kind of project.
The only resource we have, like the Arabian countries have oil, is water. Chabi Gayer, project manager at the Rasuwagadi hydroelectric project, a 111 megawatt plant under construction near China's border.
And the potential, it doesn't end there. Nepal's new closeness to China could make Chinese money rush into the country in order to finance large hydroelectric plants. Well, that's precisely what the Nepalese government is thinking.
Nepal's new communist prime minister will restart a Chinese-led $2.5 billion hydropower project that was pulled by the previous government considered friendly towards India.
Anyway, the situation now is that Nepal is still a very poor country, but with new policies, it could stop being so. So, will the new government be able to leave its ideological inclinations behind and bet on stability, openness, and foreign investment? Well, only time will tell. But now it's your turn. Do you think that Nepal should bet on China, or should it continue to strengthen ties with India? Well, leave your answer in the comments below, as well as in this survey, and I really hope you did enjoy this video. Please hit like if you did, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode, but were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.